Hi guys. So, Christmas. 'Tis the season, apparently. So I decided not to go for the usual train under a Christmas tree or something like that, and I focused on this shelf in the dining room. It's around 80 centimetres long and is only a small thing, so no room for a loop or anything like that. I did wonder how I was going to power this without wires hanging out the front. Then I remembered that I drilled out two terrible jagged holes in the back of the bookcase a few years ago to wire up a small fish tank. So, issue resolved by a younger me. Thanks, me. My idea here is that instead of having a magical world with a real Santa and elves and heavy snow like on a Christmas card, instead modelling it as a Santa special on a small narrow gauge railway. And whilst it will be in winter, it'll have more of a thin, detailed covering of snow and ice, which you don't see modelled that often. This gives the excuse to stop the train before the bridge and send it back again. Anyway, the railway isn't set in Wales, but Yorkshire. So the architecture will be something different to my usual style. At this point on the railway, the line runs alongside a brook on a path in a tramway style, before veering off into the countryside to a small halt type station. This station will be set up as a Santa's grotto, with fake Santa, presents and stuff like that. The railway would continue under the footbridge, but obviously here it'll just reverse back off scene to the right. And that's the gist of it. So let's have a look how it'll be on the shelf. First of all, the buildings. I'm pleased to say that MS Models are helping out on this build and kindly provided all the buildings. This is Roslyn Cottage, and you might have heard me saying how much I like it in a previous video, so I'm chuffed to bits that they've sent this one. You can get it from MS Models with the rear extension and the front wall in, but the basic form will fit in nicely on here. For the station building I went for a curveball. This is Nantmore, and is a corrugated iron building. I wanted something that I could give a good weathering to, with rusted panels. I didn't notice on the website, but the interior detailing on this is stunning, so I planned the layout so the station was facing the viewer, so I can see the interior. Finally, they sent a footbridge. I was a bit unsure how I would merge this into the scene due to the ends ending like that. But the idea is that one side will be on the edge of the scene, and the other side will lead onto a bank, so it should hopefully work out quite nice. So putting a plan into 3D, let's set it all up. You can see the stock destined for use on this layout. If you followed the channel, you would have seen that I put a post on this when I bought them at the Festiniog a few weeks back. You would have also seen that I got sent an Alpha 22 watt laser cutter to play with. The plan with this is that I was going to cut the baseboards out in a typical laser cut baseboard style. I got to work putting it together, and to be fair, it seemed like really good quality. I watched a lot of YouTube videos of people using this one, and it's a beast. However, I got as far as putting on the X-axis when I noticed that something wasn't right. One of the belts had snapped, which sent me into a frantic downward spiral of upset and panic. That was Saturday night, and Sunday I was up for a day at the Warley Model Railway exhibition at the NEC. The train up was a 150 and a 158 pair, and I'm always happy to jump on one of these. So let's go for a quick look around some of the narrow gauge layouts on display there. First up was Brit BR Town. It depicts a fictitious railway running to a transfer yard at the standard gauge. This layout is set on an L-shaped board and is a real joy to watch. The stock gives hints of heavier narrow gauge lines, and even though the trains are kept relatively short, there's always something going on. The colour palette is consistent between the model and the back scene as he painted both, which gives a believable merge. I've seen this layout a number of times now, but I always get sucked into watching it for a good half hour. Clyde Valley is impressive even without looking at the scenery. It's a fine example of good layout design, with the baseboards formed to follow the railway's path and not the other way around. It quite rightly won Best Narrow Gauge on show, and shows decent sized trains modelled. The scenery was to a good standard. However, I think the one thing that stuck out to me more on this than any other layout was how clean the fields and grass areas were. I think if it was me, I'd try and dirty them up a bit, as it looks a little bit too Teletubby land. And that is splitting hairs. Castle Caranian is one of those 009 layouts that I think has a really believable colour palette. I'm slightly ballast as the Welshman Lanver is my local line, but I love the stock, both as prototype and model form. The layout here isn't huge, but as its main focus of Castle Station is a common crossing point on the line, you get to see plenty of trains move in. The one issue on this layout was that the humidity in the arena seemed to affect the point work more than any other layouts I saw, so it was quite hard to get film without the hand of God in, which was a shame. Fort Whitting isn't exactly my cup of tea. I don't tend to have much interest in railways outside of Wales, but actually it was quite refreshing to see larger stock, with things like the Garretts being the main hauling power. The layout run pretty well though, and that makes a huge difference at an exhibition. It's a shame that the exit to the fiddle yard was so obvious. Maybe the placement of a little shed or something in front would obstruct it. Garwen is one of those 009 layouts that often comes up as an example of a good model. The stock is particularly lovely on this one, and again the dull colour palette really helps with the atmosphere. It's also been extended since the original build, with the line now running around a large bend to finish at a right angle to the main board, and I feel like that was a really good move by the builder. The buildings here were of a really good standard, but one thing that personally I'd revisit if it was mine was the dry stone walls, which seemed to stick out from the rest of the layout. Maybe a weathering wash or something would blend them in a bit. This and another couple of layouts at the exhibition had working crossing gates, and at first they're a joy to see. But quite quickly I start to think, well, who's manning them? So maybe it would help to have a railway figure pushing them or something like that. Theo Compass is a fresh layout on the scene, and it could be seen on the model use stand, since it was built by their excellent figure painter Dan Everson from Tunnel Lane Model Railways. The layout features MS model buildings and ready to run stock, but as it's a roundy, it's a good one to check out on the way past. Port de Norwich was built by Kathy Millett, but is now run by the Bala Railway. The layout itself is of a really high quality, as would be expected, but I think what lets this down is the cut-offs that go off scene. Disguising these with scenery would probably really help finish it off. I must say I really like how she's done the foliage on this one, plus the fact that it's a mix of narrow and standard gauge really gives the operational interest. Now, as I walked around this exhibition with a couple of friends, one thing I said multiple times was, "The lights on that layout are way too bright!" Until we got to Pen Bond. At that point I said something like, "Yes, thank you, bang on." What I'm referring to here isn't the overall lighting for the layout, which actually you can debate enough walking around the exhibition, but this time I'm talking about the little miniature LED lighting on scene. Now this layout has interior lighting in the building and platform lighting, and these are just the right level of intensity, which made such a pleasant change from others, mostly standard gauge I'll add, which have full on bright LEDs on the buffer beams, the flood lighting, things like that. And it just doesn't work at all. Maybe a dab of pen or something on the lens would dull them down a bit. I don't know, I'll try it when I do it I guess. Manning Middle is a funny layout as it's basically a massive circular track, but as the circle's got a large enough radius, you can't actually tell when you're looking at the trains running. This one had some of the best running qualities I saw in the 009 village, even if it wasn't actually 009. Not much I could criticise about this one to be fair, I was really impressed. This 009 monster is a serious go at a railway in a landscape, and a huge chunk of the Beth Gullet area on the Welsh Highland has been modelled. The builders have a real skill when it comes to stock building, with most of these locos being backwards miniature kits, which are no mean feat to get running well, and scratch built stock to boot. Seeing full length trains being modelled in a lot of scales is a rarity, especially in 009, so it's really nice to see that. The size of this layout is its strength, but also its Achilles heel. As it takes so long for a train to pass through the scene, it does take a while before you see something else. But I'm happy to take the hit there to see the train snake up the S-bend. One thing I've always noticed though is the grass, and personally I think it needs a little bit of tweaking between the board joins to get a smooth transition. But on the whole, this was probably my favourite layout of the day, and a real testament to the skill of the builders. Of course, the other thing to keep in mind as you listen to this is that I'm not qualified to judge, and purely it's my own thoughts, so I urge you to make your own judgment on these layouts. There were more, but I ran out of time, for I had a mission to complete during the exhibition. So, there I was, enjoying trains and overpriced pints of Beck's. And then something happened, something that I've wanted to happen to me since I saw it could happen. You all know by now how much of a fan I am of model used products, and you all know that I haven't yet painted up a crew for Douglas, and pretty much none of you will know that Douglas was my first TR engine that I fired. Yet, you can see where this is going. Yes, I'm getting myself scanned. This is their fancy new 3D scanner, with many cameras around it. It looks posh. And look, it's a Christmas miracle. I am on camera. Yep, that's me awkwardly posing. And that's what I look like if you're standing behind me in a queue or something. And no, I'm not struggling with a hernia. I'm intentionally leaning to the side like that, as the idea is that this figure will be peering out of the cab of number 6. That was something like 5 seconds and it's fully scanned my whole body. So trotting over to the control centre and you can already see a preview of how I look. Model U scanned a huge amount of people over the Warley weekend, so I won't receive the figure for a few months. So keep watching the videos to see the result of that one. Okay, we're back home. It's Monday night and it brought the chance to go and buy some wood to panic build a baseboard. I decided to go for a simple plywood top with a 2x1 box frame below. The board was first measured up and cut out. I actually ended up making it slightly smaller than the shelf so I could just pop on a little back scene around the sides and back. It looks like the present panhead is being drunk from a Festiniog mug. That doesn't make the job any easier, but it's nice to have. I used a jigsaw to cut the board out. Jigsaws do leave a rough edge when cut in ply, but luckily it'll be under a layer of cork, so I don't really care. Probably didn't even need to tell you that bit. The frame is a simple box style and I'm using wood glue for the primary method of securing it, with little tack nails to hold it in place as the glue dries. I think the normal method is to build the box and then attach the top, but I did it the other way round, because I'm not a carpenter. Either way it's strong and rigid, so does it even matter? It probably does. The final end has to be cut to size before attaching to the layout. The jigsaw was then used to cut off the excess bits from the frame pieces, which left a nice clean box. I'll eventually sand the side smooth as well to get a nice finish. Next I pop the layout back on the shelf to make sure it fits, which it does, which I like. The buildings and other bits were then put back on. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to raise the terrain up to allow the brook to appear lower. So I cut a second ply skin, but this time cutting the brook off. The jigsaw is a really important tool when doing jobs like this, and I'll be sad when the owner of this one realises I've still got it. The second ply layer is then glued and nailed on. The final layer is cork, and this will mimic the shape of the second ply layer and will raise it up a little bit more. This was fully glued down with PVA and left overnight with heavy books on top to hold it down. Finally, the excess cork could be trimmed off the edges. And that's it for now. Obviously I was disappointed with the laser cutter issue, but the company have already sent out a replacement belt, so I'll try again another time. Anyway, I'm back on schedule now. Panic over, and I'll look into the landscaping next. Cheers.